But I think the problem here is not a religious problem, it's a problem of ignorance. Because what we have to understand is that it's not part of the Muslim moral framework, because the Prophet has told us.
What may be happening in the West, for instance, the pastor who wanted to desecrate the copy of the Quran, I mean, Christians, there's no equivalence between that and attempting to execute someone because of their opinion.
I've seen the suffering of these Christians and at the hands of fellow Muslims. So it is not something that we can ever be proud of. We absolutely condemn it, and let me put this on the record. Wherever Muslims in the world are...
I don't agree with you. If you have a state which is based on the idea of universal human rights, then you don't privilege one religion over another, and that makes it...
Hello guys, you're welcome back.
Is clash between Islam and the West inevitable? So this is going to be a discussion between a pastor, Muslim and non-Muslim. So let's hear their thoughts.
Well, I'm joined now by Bishop Nazir Ali, the former Bishop of Rochester, Sheikh Ibrahim Mogra of the Muslim Council of Great Britain, Hamza Sortsis of the Islamic Education Research Academy, and Joan Smith of the National Secular Society. We were hoping to have Stephen Green of Christian Voice with us, but I'm afraid he is stuck on a train. First of all, gentlemen, the broad issue, this year we've had the issue over the burqa in France and other European countries. We've also had the row over an Islamic centre being built at Ground Zero, near Ground Zero, and also the case of the young Pakistani woman who spoke out against Islam and is now in jail in Pakistan facing the death sentence. Do you think this has been a year of a big turning point, a kind of intake of breath at some of the things that have been happening, Muslim to Christian, Christian to Muslim?
Well, I mean, I think the issue really here is of fundamental freedoms. Freedom to express yourself, to worship, to believe and to change your belief if you wish. That is what is common across all of these stories. But the one thing I would say is that there is really no equivalence between the stories that are coming from the West, whether it is the banning of the burqa or the minaret in Switzerland or Ground Zero, and the kinds of things we are seeing in some parts of the Islamic world. So no one is being sentenced to death for blasphemy. No one is being attacked whilst they're worshipping in church with live ammunition, as we have just heard. And these attacks are not just isolated cases, they are systemic in Egypt.
So your view is that there's a real feeling that there's a kind of a visceral nature to these now?
Well, I think that's true on both sides. I mean, I don't deny that. But what I'm saying is that what may be happening in the West, for instance, the pastor who wanted to desecrate the copy of the Quran, I mean, Christians should unreservedly condemn any such thing. But there's no equivalence between that and attempting to execute someone because of their opinions.
Presumably you would say that the position in Pakistan of the young woman who spoke out against Islam, the idea that she should face a death sentence is abhorrent to you, presumably.
Indeed. I mean, I agree with Bishop Michael about the mistreatment that we are witnessing in many Muslim lands today of non-Muslims.
Do you agree with his analysis?
I think we are comparing two different entities. We live in a free, democratic, secular, liberal society, whereas those countries are either theocratic, dictatorial, or authoritarian. So we are trying to compare two systems when they are very, very different.
But what do you think leads to what the bishop appears to be saying is a much greater degree of essentially violence and hatred?
Indeed, and I am extremely distressed by the film that we've seen, and I feel so ashamed that my co-religionists are behaving in this un-Islamic, very un-Islamic manner. The pain for me is double the pain, because I've seen the suffering of these Christians and at the hands of fellow Muslims. So it is not something that we can ever be proud of. We absolutely condemn it, and let me put this on the record. Wherever Muslims in the world are persecuting, are being prejudiced, are bullying, intimidating and harming Christians, wherever they may be, or any other community, is to be condemned, is un-Islamic, is against the teachings of Islam. Whether it's Christians in Indonesia, whether it's Christians in Pakistan, Hindus, the Qadianis, the Ahmadis, whether it's the Baha'is in Iran, wherever Muslims are persecuting non-Muslims, it is wrong and has to be condemned.
Hamza, is that your view? Particularly, let's talk about the Egyptian case. A tenth of the population are Coptic Christians. What do you think about their persecution?
Well, first and foremost, I think I personally have more of sadness with this because I come from an Orthodox background. You know, I could just imagine my sister being in that situation. You know, she's not Muslim, and that would frighten me. That would affect me in ways that would be transcendental. It would shock me as a fellow human being. But I think the problem here is not a religious problem. It's a problem of ignorance. Because what we have to understand is that it's not part of the Muslim moral framework. Because the Prophet has told us that there is no harming and there's no reciprocating of harm. That we must love what we love for ourselves for others. That we don't harm people. That whoever harms a non-Muslim under our political power harms himself.
What do you say about Tim's analysis and what was being said by a Coptic Christian in Egypt? That there's a kind of Islamification. And in fact, the authorities in Egypt are actually entrenching that Islamification because people are being regarded as lesser citizens, and also the whole thing about apostates as well.
Sure.
There's a real problem if people want to convert out of Islam to Christianity and vice versa, and it's actually the state in Egypt that's the problem.
Well, I disagree. I don't think the Mubarak regime has an Islamification agenda. Its agenda is a dictatorship. We know this. According to mainstream human rights organizations, they are torturing people. I have friends who have been tortured in Egyptian prisons. It's a nightmare. So I don't think the problem is Islam, because as you've heard, the Islamic values don't promote this. So what the problem is not Islamification, but almost some type of ignorant dehumanization.
Joe?
Well, of course the problem is religion, and I think if you are entirely indifferent to religion, as I am, I'm actually not very interested in it. What you see is not a clash of civilizations, but a contest between power systems, because religions are systems of power. And I think the problem is, and actually what this shows you is the importance of secular states. If Egypt was a secular state, this kind of thing would not be happening, because there wouldn't be a dominant religion. I mean, I've been to a Coptic church in...
I disagree with that. I mean, if you look at India, it's the world's largest secular democracy, and I'm really proud of what India is today. But the religious strife there is beyond control. But I believe that it is not because of religion. This is purely political and economic and other issues which are being played up.
I would want to disagree with both of you. I think secularity is also a power system, and I agree with you about India being a very bad example of a secular state. But I think that religion is at the bottom of this in Egypt, certainly, as we've seen.
Let's talk about Egypt.
Yes, I mean, there's discriminatory law arising out of the Article 2 of the Constitution.
I think religion is being misused.
Well, it may be, but that may be the case. But Article 2 of the Constitution says that Sharia is the principal source of law in Egypt. And many of the problems about people changing their identity cards, about recognition of marriages, all of those things that we've just heard stem directly from what the Egyptian state believes the Sharia to be. Now, I'm very glad for Sheikh Ibrahim to tell them and me that it is not, but that is what they believe.
And as far as you're concerned, is Sharia law in Egypt of itself a good thing?
Well, I think the manifestation of Islamic law in Egypt is not actually a manifestation of Islamic law. I mean, we have activists in Egypt that are trying to call for a true, positive, loving, merciful, compassionate version of Islam, which we believe is an orthodoxy version of Islam. And it's very important to point, just to finish this point, they are more persecuted. The people are calling for Islamic values are persecuted. But I have to make this point, it's a very profound point. When Islamic values were implemented in a very positive light in history, we had even Jewish historians saying amazing things about the state of the Jews. For example, we have Zain Zohar, who's a contemporary Jewish historian, saying amazing things.
Why do we have to have Islamic values? Why can't we have universal human rights? And
that's what Islamic values are.
I don't agree with you. And if you have a state which is based on the idea of universal human rights, then you don't privilege one religion over another, and that makes it a much safer place for everybody, including
we're going to come back to
people.
this conversation in a moment, but let's move on now to talk about Switzerland, because Joan Smith, just coming to you, this idea in the Swiss example of a mirroring of that attitude of one or the other.
I think what's interesting about the Swiss minaret vote is that it expresses a I mean, there is an element of racism there, clearly, but it's not just that. It's also like the burqa ban in France, which I'm not actually in favour of, because I don't like banning things, but I think what it expresses is an anxiety about religious symbols and the intrusion of religion back into public life. And what you have to remember is that, you know, the men sitting around this table, and with the exception of me, they are all men, are not representative of the general population, because most of us don't go to church, we don't go to the mosque, we don't go to the synagogue. We actually are indifferent to religion, and we don't like it being forced onto us.
But do you think that you sense that the lack of understanding, given that you're secular, the lack of understanding between the religions leads to fear?
Yes, it's not just lack of understanding, it's also competition, because there are states where Islam is the main religion, states where the Christianity is the main religion, and they don't want to lose their access to power. These are patriarchal power systems.
And what about the idea that they are patriarchal power systems, and women are the ones actually who tend to be the victims, and any expression on either side of problems that comes through the women?
Yes, and if you look at what's happening in Egypt, women began to stop wearing the veil in Egypt in the 1920s, and it's really alarming when you go to Egypt now, because there are almost no women who aren't wearing the veil, and I don't think it's all voluntary, it's social pressure.
I don't believe that two religions cannot live together despite one being in the power position. If you look at the history of Islam, Christianity has had an existence in continuity throughout
Interesting, not necessarily in democracies, but in dictatorships. You might say that under Saddam, Christians fared better in Syria.
Indeed, Tariq was in a very high position. If you look at Jordan, for instance, I was there with a Christian-Muslim pilgrimage group, and we were told that the parliament there is designed through proportional representation. And by virtue of percentage of Christians, they should have had only 8 seats in parliament. They have 16.
But why would you give people seats in parliament according to their religion?
Yes, because otherwise they wouldn't get in. But I mean, I think the point,
positive way of
the point is that in history, all totalitarianism has arisen out of secular ideologies, not out of religion.
Oh, nonsense.
Well, look at the 20th century. You've got National Socialism, you've got Stalinism, you've got Mao Zedong and his Cultural Revolution, Pol Pot, even Saddam Hussein's fascism. I mean, how many more examples do you want? So, I mean, what I'm saying is that secularity is also a power system. It may or may not be patriarchal. I think on the whole it has been very patriarchal. But it is a power system, and it should not be given a privileged position of neutrality.
But Hamza, what about the idea that the failure here is essentially with the men around this table? Because you are the leaders in your community and should be the ones who are actually stepping up to the plate and doing more.
I totally agree. I think we've all failed here. I think what's very important is come back to our common element, in essence, which is our humanity. And what do human beings want to do? Like my son, what does he do? He basically says, Dad, look at that. He wants to share. So human beings want to share things. So I think what's very important is that we share, but we share our differences.
But do you think that multiculturalism is a problem?
I think secularism is a problem.
No, well, do you think multiculturalism is a problem?
Well, I think having many cultures under a certain political entity is great and it's fine. It's actually an Islamic concept. Having different tribes and nations together, we live happily. That's a great thing to do.
But the problem is that communities don't live happily, and what we see increasingly in
There's
areas,
a reason for that.
Well, in the areas of the United Kingdom are areas where communities do not interact, and increasingly where communities stay entirely separate.
Do
you want that to happen?
No, we need good leadership. In frankness, what we need to do is we need to get leaders who are in touch with people's humanities, that could connect with other fellow human beings and say, you know what, we always talk about commonality, but that's going to bring us together anyway. Let's talk about the differences, because the differences are the thing that are causing the fears. If we talk about them, we express them in a human way, then there won't be fears anymore.
Why have we allowed a situation of multiculturalism to exist where people are essentially separated into
Well, exactly. I think multiculturalism, and it's that ism bit that's the problem, has created this situation of segregation of communities, of people not talking to one another, of being inward looking. In Britain,
do you think you've failed to a certain extent in your leadership?
Of course we've all failed, as Hamza has just said, but I mean the point is that in Britain particularly, it is the Judeo-Christian heritage, the Bible, which provides a way of welcoming people, of hospitality, of being hospitable.
And we are losing that.
Yes, indeed, absolutely, and of equal of treating the stranger as yourself. I mean, that should have been the basis for constructing an inclusive society.
But as you say, it's worse now. So if it goes on being worse, what is the next downward step?
I think we need to begin to examine very, very carefully how we are representing each other. The stereotyping of Muslims, the vilification, demonization. I mean, where is this going to end? And I without drawing parallels with the 1930s and the Holocaust, but you can see how the Nazis began to demonize a community to such a level where they could be described as rats from the sewers and could be exterminated, which led to a terrible Holocaust. Millions were lost.
I'm not suggesting that this is good. What I'm saying, this is where this country.
Well, I would be, of course, strongly against any such attempt. Again, I think the whole thing goes back to affirming people's fundamental freedom.
That is
what we should be doing.
What's very funny about this is that you have men who have benefited from multiculturalism because they become imams, they become community leaders.
I relish the fact that I live in a multicultural
society. Very briefly.
And what they have done, these people are turning themselves into victims. What about the women in their communities who aren't allowed to learn English and who are forced into marriages against their will, who can't go out to work, who can't join the larger society?
That is wrong.
Yes, you are the leaders of this community.
I'm afraid on that point we will have to leave it here. Thank you all very much.
Amazing discussion. I'm really surprised that this Muslim scholar said what they said about Muslims, saying that they are not representing them well. Why would they be doing things that, you know, it's not accepted in Islam? You get it? And I love this whole discussion, their opinions, you know, the fact that they still stood their ground, irrespective of the fact that that's their religion. They still said what was on their mind. People seeing them would think maybe they will support their religion or try to say something else, but the fact that they actually, you know, said what they said is as if they are trying to, I don't know, they are not contradicting their religion per se, but I was really shocked that they could say that about those people terrorizing the country, saying that they are Muslims, but they are not Muslims that they can be proud of, because why would they, you know, do things in such manner? It's not accepted in their book, in their religion, in Quran. Well, that was a very beautiful one. Let me know your point of view. I don't know whether I'm making sense, but I don't want to talk too lengthy. That's why I'm just trying to, you know, pinpoint, take one or two things and say. But we all, you know, listen to the video, and I really enjoyed every bit of this conversation. Thank you so much for watching. Let's not forget to smash the subscribe button for more. Like, share, and comment. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.